All right, let's get this moved over just a little bit so I can see everybody. All right, welcome everybody to a Common Sense reading series featuring this afternoon's readers, Hilary Plum, Anthony Robinson, and Michelle Taransky. For anyone who's attending the series for the first time, my name is Jordan Stempelman. I started this series in Kansas City in 2011. I went through my readings recently, and this is my 95th Common Sense reading that I've hosted. So that's probably over like 250, 275 readers. So this has been going for a long time, and I'm really excited. It keeps re-energizing itself with readers like we have today. So thank you all for attending, and please come back. So I've archived past remote readings on my website. Here's the link to that. And so in a few days, couple days, I will upload this video to YouTube, so you'll have a chance to watch it. But there's a bunch of videos in the archive that are great ever since I went to the remote reading setting or format. This series will go dormant over the summer. I'll resume in person in Kansas City starting in September, with 3 remote readings in the spring of 2025. Following this reading, there will be a brief Q&A. And so you all can post any questions you might have for the readers in the chat, and I'll be sure to ask them on your behalf. Also, writers, if you have questions for one another, that's great too. So feel free to ask one another questions. So the order tonight will be Hilary Plum, then Anthony Robinson, and then Michelle Taransky. I will also post some links to their books in the chat after I introduce them. Hilary Plum is the author of 5 books, most recently Excisions, a volume of poetry and whole studies, an essay collection. Her novel State Champ is forthcoming from Bloomsbury in 2025. With Zach Savage, she edits the Open Prose series at Rescue Press. With Zach Peckham, she co-hosts the podcast Index for Continuance. She teaches at Cleveland State and serves as Associate Director of the CSU Poetry Center. Please welcome Hilary Plum.
Hi. I see there are some Cleveland and Northeast Ohio folks here. Hello, everyone. I'm going to read. I'm so excited to read with Michelle and Anthony, and thank you, Jordan, for all the work that you do. I'm going to read a new poem that's still in progress, so I'm just going to read until it stops. And to begin it, I'm going to play like a little clip that some of you may know really well. It is, especially if you've seen all 497 episodes of the original Law and Order. I got really, at some point this winter, I got really obsessed with one word in particular in this text.
In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by 2 separate yet equally important groups: the police who investigate crime and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. These are their stories.
I like to cut it off before that. Don't, just to keep everyone interested. All right. This poem is called Important Groups, and it's very new. Okay. Important groups. Police are not a group. Women are not a group. Children are a group. 13,000 children who prosecute the offenders. It is not fair if you think of him as representative. We do not think of him as representative. We do not call him a fucking creep because he is representative. Every day on and off the bus. Once a university made a mistake. Universities are a group. Senators are a group. A2 senators. In the criminal justice system, the people are represented. We couldn't have said it better ourselves. The university supports some military actions. The university supports most military actions. Military actions are a group that the university supports, involving the bombing of other universities. Terrorists are not a group. It would be convenient. Hospitals are not a group. Hospitals are personal. 2 separate yet equally important groups are not separate: the police who investigate crime, the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. Offenders are not The mistake was contextual, e.g., he wasn't bringing a gun to campus because he was a school shooter. He was a person who carries a gun who was stopping by campus. He would have made perfect sense a few blocks away. School shooters are a group, and these days, more of them are surviving for trial. People who bomb schools almost always survive and are not school shooters. They are a group a university can support. Snipers firing at adults and children outside. The police received calls from children inside the classroom. The police were scared to enter. The police received the equipment from the military. This forms a group. Snipers, a group. Fucking creeps, a group. Most people can identify, though fucking creeps often cannot identify themselves. Each other is a group. Children identify each other. Adults are higher up and doing something else. Adults are a group who are killing children. These are two separate yet equally important groups. Women and children first, like on Titanic. On Titanic, the ship, the groups were not equally important, not like in Titanic, the movie. Leo was representative of the equal importance of the working class, and he was better at fucking and art, so not equal. It is okay that more men died in the North Atlantic because men were more involved in everything stupid with the ship sinking, but not most of them. Titanic was a she, and she died. But her body is important, and James Cameron really represented it in an unprecedented way. People are represented by the extras in Titanic when the ship cracks into two separate but equally sinking ships. The people are represented by Falling Man on 9/11, an innocent man who fell from the soon-to-be falling towers, and him you should not describe as chickens coming home to roost. Because we identify his silhouette, he is not representative. Chickens are a group. 9/11 is a group, but you can't say why. 15,000 children, no longer in Gaza, no longer anywhere. Drone pilots, a group. Dreaming in infrared, cannot recognize each other. Can the offender recognize himself and the people represented by his prosecution who trespass against us? These are their stories. Hospitals treating children for bullet wounds from snipers. No more hospitals. These are their universities. This is self-defense. What is a war on terror? Fears are not a group. Dreams are not a group. Systems novels are a group. Before 9/11, bin Laden was concerned about dreams. In his group of men, some men had told him they were seeing the important buildings in their dreams, and he was worried his plan would be in people's dreams everywhere revealed. He ordered his men, don't talk about your dreams anymore. It worked. Jon Stewart is not a group anymore. Jon Stewart is personal. People who don't like seeing photos on their phones of children dying while they're trying to post photos of their own children, this is a group. Deans are a group, and provosts. You would recognize provosts on Titanic. Librarians are increasingly personally targeted by groups every day. Librarians, doxing is personal. 84 years later, the Coeur de la Mer falls into the sea. Titanic predicts Falling Man. Leo is an American who will free you from the epistemic burdens of your privilege. You will go to a real party. Authenticity is a group, and sincerity. Real parties will not be televised. Nation states are a group. Excused absences are a group. We are concerned about fears. Errors are a group. Ghosts are not a group. Historical murderers and current murderers. AI is not a group. AI is no one. AI is a nation state. AI recommends targets, recommends targeting librarians, journalists, writers, teachers, children collateral, children collateral. AI has no access to dreams, but feeds on itself increasingly these days, like chickens in factory farming. I would read DeLillo, but I don't read men much anymore. It's stupid. Maybe if I stop reading them, they will stop emailing me. Maybe they will stop dreaming of me reading their emails, doing their stupid jobs. Bombing along the purview of men these days is increasingly inclusive, drone pilots increasingly as a group diverse and traumatized because they have to watch their targets for so long very personally before killing them. These are their traumas. I respect DeLillo and would love to be personally respected that way. I did get $150 from the production of the movie White Noise to film my house in Cleveland in the background, which they never did, I think, I don't know. I was authentically at work for 11 hours that day. I would divert the trolley for DeLillo. Pulitzer Prize winners are a group. Empaths are a group. Newsies are a group. And Al-Qaeda, former groups are still groups. You can make a new group, especially if you are a corporation. Like in East Palestine, Ohio, spelled Palestine, said Palestine. When the train derailed and a corporation lit all the vinyl chloride stored on the train, bent and burned to prevent some other disaster, some worse disaster than a cloud of burning chemicals that blocked the sun. as if identifying with the filming of White Noise 90 Miles Away, which was in Cleveland, where they film a lot of movies these days. Not because they want to film in Cleveland, they want to film nowhere. Cleveland's abandoned warehouses look dystopian for superheroes and make good background for CGI. It's good to be empty for the arrival of technology. Abandoned warehouses are a group. A year later, it was determined no one had to burn all the chemicals into the air of East Palestine. That wasn't right. A year later, some people said that these people who were working class in Ohio probably already had headaches, blurred vision, bloody noses, rashes already before the chemical cloud. Federal investigators fell ill after brief visits. I just learned they can put machine guns on drones, sniper rifles on drones. I learned it because they are using these technologies against children in Gaza, the Israeli military, the US military. People who have never heard drones buzzing all day, every day above them are a group including me, who has only seen drones one or two at a time, like when the police kill a young man in his car at a traffic stop in Cleveland, and later there's a march, and that man's sister asks everyone, white folks to the outside, black folks to the middle, asks us all to kneel on the hot asphalt in the intersection where he died. If you look up just then, you will see a drone. It's hard to picture a sound you've never heard, like the crack of a ship that big in half, which we rewatch on New Year's. The descendants of First Officer Murdoch, who you will remember shoots a working class man in a struggle over lifeboats, then shoots himself, ashamed. His descendants demanded an apology from James Cameron. The movie was not representative, they said. Mr. Murdoch died like a man doing his duty. These days, you can listen to recordings of icebergs calving underwater, icebergs 50 miles long due to technology. You hear this inhuman vibration due to YouTube. Radiohead is not a group. Tom York is a group. Billy Zane plus a baby is a group. Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young is not a group. Neil Young is a group. These days, the past is becoming more recognizable. When they sent the National Guard to Kent State, when the National Guard opened fire, when Neil Young put Nixon's name in the song Ohio, that was seen as courageous. Now that gesture is seen as normal, expected, but the past retains its differences. Now you can make fun of a president nonstop on SNL and still basically be supporting him. He likes to watch. There is no such thing as bad publicity. All of publicity is a group. Now you can release a great protest song like Most Def's Katrina Clap, and it will not be named one of the greatest records of all time. No, that was true then or whenever. Most Def, who is now Yassine Bey, had a feeding tube forcibly shoved down his throat in protest of the forced feedings of prisoners on hunger strike in protest at Guantanamo Bay, which never closed. They were never charged. Promised an end, but it has never come. Every day, a tube forced down, pulled up. Of the song Ohio, critics now know the revolution never came. Spotify is a group. SNL is a group. The past is not a group. I tell my mom about the mistakes at my university. She worked her whole career part-time at mistake-making universities. I'm so sorry, she says, having put out a dish of the olives I like. You're going to have to burn it all down. I think we tried everything else. That's as far as I've gotten. Thank you guys for listening. Jordan, you're muted.
I know I'm getting all these like pop-ups for, are you sure you want to do this and that? And so I was just making sure I was sure. Thank you, Hilary. That was wonderful, powerful. Our next reader is Anthony Robinson. Anthony lives and writes in the foothills of the Cascade Range in Western Oregon. His poems appear variously. His book, Failures of the Poets, was published by Canarium Books in 2023. Fantastic book. Please welcome Anthony Robinson. And I should say we had some video difficulties, so you'll be listening to Anthony.
Is this thing on? All righty. Hey, everybody. Thanks, Jordan, for inviting me. And I wish there was some kind of, graphic you could put up there, because people are just looking at whatever. I'm a ghost. All right. So I'm going to read a few poems from my book, and then I'll go ahead and read a couple of new pieces. And anyway, here we go. This one is called Anniversary. And this is an old poem I wrote about, let's see, 22 years ago. So I'm kind of slow in publishing things. Anniversary, Memorial Day 2002. Absent, not kissed, how much you differ from my earlier work. These anniversaries glut, push, disappear where clouds ain't floating. They close the coffee shop with us still in it. 7 types of anxiety, clutter, fumble, later poems and much later poems, and 4 kinds of not. Does Iowa look like Oregon or away? You can't rework that thing no more, it's done. Much later, the poems have done. No more, you. Smiling, we swallow the packets, sugar, not kissed, unsolved, not absolved. Our sins make fools of our circle, our love. October leave taking in a sonnet about Milton and bacon, the breakfast food, not the Enlightenment man. Okay. This one is I Will Take Your Dead. I will take your dead and deploy them far beyond the bluish mountains and green dark lakes, lichened trees, because I have no substance of my own. Isn't it queer, little one, that we find ourselves immaterial? Someone said render aid, someone said esprit de corps, and I thought it meant the soul leaving the body, but I misunderstood. It really means go team. Needless to say, it fractured my sensibilities. The Lord is my beam splitter, my lumberjack, my Jewish uncle. My father is dead. He's been dead 8 months. And the further I bury your corpses from their point of origin, the more I feel divested. That word again, that cocooning, body as clothing, as raiment, as chrysalis or warp of light, there is nothing inside. So it is Thursday morning. I build the fire. I cook the rice. I inject the fat part of my stomach with a needle full of some shit from AstraZeneca. Finally, I bake the bread. This is my body, but I still carry yours. I long to be. All right, what's next? Another day in May. Now more coffee and Brian Wilson and skittering creatures. I've eaten tacos for 3 days straight, and Dad is still on oxygen. To feel intense grief, not right now, is also to feel guilty concerning elements and microbes. What makes a man sick is also what kills him. What kills a man is also what sustains him. Here, love is a concept. Mercy is an act of unshabby imagination. Mother puts out food for the goldfinches. A famous athlete debases himself to the applause of at least dozens. I've been meaning to talk to you about the shade tree and all the shade tree people who are is exactly as lazy as I and exactly as beaten down. Surveyors are ranging out back, putting posts in all things. In winter, we waited for the sun, and now he's here. But will he make it through another year? Early dispatch. I guess this is my political poem. I mean, whatever. Early dispatch. Monday in America, still super great. Love is not like this, sometimes only half great, other times not great at all. Looking from here, from my perch, into distances and quantities, teaspoons, farthings, handspan of some random midshipman, all depths held at bay, not yet departed. Omaha is in Nebraska, land of beef and sweet corn, and there America is pumping methane into the sweet air, fracking fossil fuels and blessing their browns with sub-minimum wage labor, like miniature foreign Herculeses. This is more and better than love, my love. This is the land of the bronzed, but only artificially. White eye holes protrude from chopper exhaust swept hair. Our raccoon in chief roots around in the trash and loves no one because he knows better. It's really great here. The depths and distances give buoyancy to my minor horniness, give heft to my deficit, by which I mean my pockets. Women of America, hear me. Don't you wish you had as many pockets as I? Don't you want to make authentic tortillas with me? There is a wide and grand fence around my yard, my country. The contractors built it on shaky foundation. My love keeps falling down or scaled by 40-year-old interlopers. They say we want a revolution, old boy. Nobody wants that. I can frolic in the surf, hold starfish aloft to the waxing moon. In this light, I look just as white as anybody else. My bare, tawny feet planted firmly in the shifting American sands. Even tan, your skin seems white. Friends, let's disappear. Let's go where the love is. Let's Americanize our hearts with airwaves and gunwales and new partners. America is not the place for love. The ground has ground us down. Once I gathered in an alley with 3 white men and 4 brown bottles. The police stayed away. This is paradise. Okay. And this poem is called Decade 2009 because it's about 2009. The cedar waxwing can literally die from getting drunk on berries. It wears a jaunty helmet and hurts nobody, though sometimes it swerves into another life. I wrote about the rhetoric of violence in the New York school in order to become a doctor of poetry and beating people up. But I didn't yet have a daughter. Hand-sized spiders hung like inky death from every window in our cracked winter house. Outside, wild turkeys. I was walking a slim black dog, and getting drunk on beers in the dark was so visible I couldn't see a thing. The animals in their bushes vibrated with a cool radiance. So much electricity in snowed alleys, so much sleeping with sweet mothers, so many moving vans scattering our dulcet youth. I am the king of infinite space. We were young and we were shattered. We took our lives and we settled down. I like your town and your trees and your bodies of water, the way the music drains out across a field. No vision here. The house we built, no more than a maintenance shack. Insect shells, dry road, no visions. I don't believe I understand. God was happening all at once, and even though we didn't believe, he made us good in the wind, made us something big and dead. And so comes love. So comes this anniversary. So comes again up, empty, open on the face of the waters, open across the breadth of the sea. Okay, and this one is a Sunday morning. A Cara Cara orange and a cup of instant coffee. Thoughts of a hungry ginger cat and a raven given to being quarrelsome. Complexities of the sepulchre, and then of the selfie, then of the self-defense plea. What does anybody know? About the child you left behind? About a girlfriend you abandoned? About how easy it is to blame the same day plague? This orange is my flesh, my Christ. For a non-believer, it's all we can do. Coffee, dark oil tar, and beyond the weekend field. Finally, praying hands know no rest. Nobody remembers the cathedral on fire, or Leonardo's shadow toward light, sfumo, they call it. Nobody smiles now. I'm making cookies and thinking of flying machines. Okay, excuse me, riffling pages here. And this is called Milan. We arrived and sat in the garden where Augustine bled, prophesied by sliding knives into books, kissed but on cheeks, rubbed flannels until sparks ignited the animals, then felt ashamed, fell upward, past cumulus, beyond crystal. You, soiled anchoress, don't remember this, can only convulse inside your enclosure. I struggle with my typefaces. This is remembrance. We came here for your savior, stayed for that grove, each apricot sweeter than the rest. And I guess that's what I'm reading from the book. And now I got two new ones here that I'm going to find on my phone in like 2 seconds. So I don't think I'm going over time here, am I? So last April, every April I try to do the poetry writing thing every day, and I never get past about 7 days. So last year I started writing sonnets. So and I got about seven of them, um, which is normal. And this one is called Abjuration Number Three, which you can figure out there were seven abjurations. It's a way of thinking that tries to get out of my way and your way, a kind of getting over. See Berryman, Prospero. A rejection of syllables, of making sense, but sensible. We talk about the mind, but not the thought. Someone said rabbit light, atmospheric river, our last few sticky nights in a foreign bed. Clap on, clap off. Into the darkness, we interpret fawns leap, shaking like milk, bringing home these parcels to an empty room, so not a home. Hold this abalone shell aloft. In the yard, two does devouring grass, their leaping children. I will turn this dross to gold. And finally, this is Birthday Party. Birthday Party. A lot of bad things out there, an understatement. We're trying not to say it, but not very hard. We're saying it relentlessly. The surfeit of grievance almost embarrasses, almost entertains. The surgery of the early sunrise on the dead children. The mosquito bites. Somebody burned a grape in the microwave. And then there's the next day and the next. I forgot what I said to you to make you listened. I make you cry. I listened to you cry. You whom I helped make. You growing up a Jew in the 21st damned Mexican century without a wall, in winter formal dress and high top chucks. I don't know when you cry or who it is you mourn for, fall and spring back into life. Like all those kids who could have been you, I tell you that we aren't different species. I heard about your bad grades in math. Math creates and destroys. Cliches and poems aren't always bad, but we live in bad times. 15 years ago, I lay my head on your mother's stomach to hear you. 57 days ago, a new war began. 51 years I've lived in this shattered shell, this shotgun life, this loaded question. Everything again is blown away. Our heads to the ground, the far crying. And thanks.
That was fantastic, Anthony. I've been a big fan of yours from the early blogger days. I think it was
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
a long time. That's when I first discovered your poetry, I think early 2000s. And this is the first
Yeah.
time I actually got to hear you read. So um, a long wait, well worth it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Our final reader today will be Michelle Taransky. Michelle is the author of Barn Burned Then and Sorry Was in the Woods, both from Omnidon. Factory Hollow published her chapbook, Abramowitz Grossberg, in 2020. She teaches writing at Penn, is a contributing editor for Jacket 2, and hosts the Butt Company, which used to be known as Whenever We Feel Like It reading series at the Kelly Writers House, which is such a great, I love the name of that. Please welcome Michelle Taransky.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Anthony. It was so wonderful to hear you read. Those that know me that are here know I'm a big crier, but that was really beautiful, that last poem. And Hilary, thank you. I'm gonna try to read without crying about y'all's poems. I think I can do it. I'm also gonna read a long poem that is my first long poem ever. And Jordan really helped me by letting me send it to him and telling me to keep working on it. So I'm really grateful to read it out loud. And thanks to my friend Stephanie for being here. She'll know about the vagina anecdote at the playground because she was there for it. And you guys will hear about it. Okay. Yeah. It's called The Men in the Room Do But. I didn't remember Dean's Art of Recklessness like Ben. This time, I won't write a thing about fuck your whisper network, because this morning I imagined Dean saying amen and me writing this down. If I could keep resisting the impulse, typing, I promise you, names change, into the chat window hovering just off screen. If these were windows I could see myself in with Dean's reflection, a farmhouse. Like Brene, I look feverishly for windows, not for myself, but for the others. All of our stories were doors. I too find a husband who could care less. I hated all the ceiling fans in our home. I felt my father's teacher's promise. They kill the angels in the rooms. Even our children might want to be read to through the changing seasons, the minor feelings, a beloved, difficult teacher is dead. Who will listen to me? Tell it now. Around the workshop table, Ben did scream, I am here too. With a kind of sadness I do not know until I am panting. I am screaming. This is anguish. I feel my childhood stutter returning. I cannot pronounce the letter R. I cannot find a library with enough of Peter's books to make a fort to protect myself from observation. I looked to the window frame, painting the window and the glass so I could not be seen. The window frame is a painting. Through the window, I am seeing all the girls uncomfortable vacationing. In the window, I hide in the bottom corner of my screen. In another window, Tom posts Nick's poem. Ritual seems like the least bullshit way to make a break for it. And this window makes me feel, Frank would yell, roll down all the windows. But what if it's me who feels sick? So sick, I can't stop reading the poem Peter posted to his timeline when time was not going anywhere for me. I messaged Peter about the hushed and the quieting by writing, sorry, it's been a difficult season for me. I have been saying a lot and really loudly. My husband says I am screaming. I am texting Amanda about Ariel, how he wrote, this is where Fanon perhaps failed to see the body of the Jew. And I am not sure, I remember, if he did not break the line. I am breaking. I write that I am coping on a spreadsheet. I have been making patterns across for years now. These records siloed in their cells. It feels like 1971. I feel like the black mold and want to feel like the black dress in Peter's poem I show Ellen. She tells me how reasonable it is to assume the main character knows the genre she is in, reflecting the daughter she taught to see her. I find it easier to think about your daughters than my own. Der Niester, the hidden one, as you're confident I am the one to force you into the healing circle. You can call it throwing my ass into a healing circle or keep it to yourself and heal. Hushing, our children. You asked for them to be at this table. You wanted a leaf for, we planted a tree here for her. I took pictures and I pictured another. I will connect to the family of things they need for clearing their field for the fall. I didn't want my baby's first words to be hush. Despite the hush, I didn't feel silenced. I pointed out the scapegoats in the novel and assigned pet names, decided seating arrangements, invested in shimmering serveware, set out the bath bombs, and then nothing about myself again, ever. Limited options to imitate, so I do, reading the poems again, wondering if I read them again and ask Charles again, are they the same poems we read together then? I thought when I read them then, there was a language there in Chicago, in the libraries, the poems' ideas. They are not wondering if I am what I am in the light, in the dark. I did not want the poems to be tradition. I did ask the poems to tell me steadily was okay, seeing lighthouse after lighthouse. Dean writing, there are many manuals, but by the time I read it, I no longer needed them. No one said unsilencing the workshop. No one looked me in the eye across the table. I wasn't interested in picturing anyone else but Alice. So what if everyone says this isn't personal? This is reading in bed. At the same time, Seth is posting, he can't forget the first conversation he had where Dean talked about his poetry and flowers. Dean said the poem is a creation myth, and the hardest feedback was not knowing mark or a detonator sentence. Even now, a beloved student saying the term for deficit language is deficit language does not preclude suffering or avoid the quiet side of the table. Another student emails to ask if I know the Yiddish word for the one who is in charge of organization. He's sorry, he's forgotten it. The dorm lights never go out. As Yakin suggests, fantasy, and I go on about myths. I hadn't considered fantasy Rose's critical account. You can call me Barbara if you want. You can ask me how I keep making states despite the things I no longer believe in or hope for. The courage teacher. I used to stand in for Susan around the table. Meltzer asks us to consider the portrait before complaining. We cannot, all of us, see ourselves in a painting. Some of us will never cross bodies of water to stand there. So how does this work? How do I imagine my own representation in a museum the critics are calling boring? If I taught the art of doing nothing, if I could show them stuttering in the sentences they remember otherwise, facts can be fable again. I'll text my friends the same Oliver poem twice. And who am I to be the one to feel precarious? Like the writers I am describing, do I still have much to conceal? If I want total certainty of truth, total disclosure, more than the terms I need the way it feels when Peter writes, I thought I was done. Again, I still want it to be a play. I want Chekhovian dialogue here. I want sincerity and apology and the goddamn permission to dismiss the writer's insistence on voice. Give me yelling the loud house I left instead of the leaky house. Too many things have become mine. It's the first time I don't want to be defined. Seeing how Sylvia, not a Jew, draws from Holocaust. There are too many ways to read this. I yell to the audience. Feels haunted now. I am yelling. I am finished yelling, finally. I feel weird about you waiting for me to approach the lectern. This is a lecture where I do not behave like a leading lady, but a lamp that is dimming before our eyes. Peter says it's getting to me, and he means him, not me there yet. Last Yom Kippur at the playground, Lisa told me she found a penny buried in the crotch of her underwear. It felt just like a sermon when she texts me later, don't write a poem about my vagina. While Charles posts to his timeline, the world is half night. Peter once wrote, but it all seems all right now. And Michael is preparing his bitter green salad for dinner, says he doesn't believe in memory, his own memory, that is. Is it Peter's mesmer? Speak, Phyllis, wrote Oppen. The girl's name is Phyllis, and Rob's, this window feels the fantasy of voice, the murmur, working in the timber industry to escape the war. I hadn't thought about who'd be best to play Joan before she died. When I was asking Ellen how her sister died, I did consider I might not be glad to know. I'll say not to LaShawn hurrah, but no one wants vaudeville, Donna especially, and Sharon. They don't even know what it is. Karen just wants to straighten her hair. Imagine her daughter with a better nose. After I saw Jewish Noses 1993 to 95, I'd spend too long researching Jewish identities in American art. And even then, I couldn't talk without showing an image. I don't resist pointing to the screen, the old master paintings. Yes, you can be a person in the crowd. Here, writing is what he says has made the painting. There's no conjuring, strong dialogue here. We are yelling at the screen in front of you. I am so busy reading theory. I try not to imagine being the lone caretaker, telling you I feel so lonely. I am the only one minimizing the significance. And what remains to be romanticized. Teaching that particular play remains complicated for me. The urgency of every scene to include the snake. I don't need to remind myself this is not a play, yet I find myself calling for a raven, thinking snake, then break, in the foundation followed by thunder, and I think I see the stage changing, often permitted to, today permitted to. I pretend to know the angle for the best selfie while asking Google, what is the value of the many students who want sincerity all the time? It's exhausting. I talk for 6 hours straight before Jerry's reading, where Ron mispronounces davening. Someone is always writing to me. I see the ellipsis every time I turn my phone's face over. When I told you I got sick vacuuming the basement, I was at the party telling Amanda how I feel about Al saying Charles recalculates Stephen's loneliness in Jersey City. I don't have to do more than tell her once. She nods. We are Jews doing Jewish things. Everyone is talking about, where do Jews do Jewish things? Jews do Jewish things. Everyone is talking about poems here. Who gets to play Jewish in a conversation? Most movies cut the protagonist's scene there. This won't ever air, though. I auditioned for the lead, reciting the Kaddish swang. Of course, I am not an animal. I was a girl davening, thinking, I am good enough to teach someone to love me good. Someone is getting canceled, and who will pitch it as a stutter, not your quieting, the swerve that shook the hush into the description of the horrors, leading Melissa to write a book I didn't know about body farms until I read a student paper. Honestly, before the higher ups say so, I don't even consider the ways I am not right to play Joan. So I promise to remember the devouring mother. Trust me, I'll be her. So some say I'm trying to forget Sundays. Some have another mother now. Some say the mother does not stop. And some say nothing, no matter the mother. The mothering I have done, I say, the mothering I have done. I do not answer when my mother calls me. I am reading an email with the subject, The Wasteland After 100 Years. My daughter is saying to the screen, how do you know me so well? This morning, I wake up in a house that leaks, watch my dad's story with the detail of his drawing a house that leaks, and then death of a miser. I take a screenshot to send to Jordan, and Jordan texts a link to his childhood cantor's obituary. He would hold your hands and stare at you in front of the congregation as he sang to you. One can be two, I text Jordan back. Dean's new optimism is the same to me as Dean's fucked up ode. Now I'm Googling the Shirley Cohen controversy and not the elephants teaching zoology. Another window looking for what's important about the leathers. Another for what took you so long. I forget everything I asked you to bring except furies. Gloomy pantoum, clown, the injuries inquiry. The reader knows best how a productive season happens in his own field, how we must finally father ourselves, finding home in metaphors rather than the conventional. We will end up showing people really at work, say without saying sorry, now I am feeling as well as I might. This is what a Big Mac tastes like, what the cats are clawing at. This isn't Joan or her second husband. Her bestie, Dr. Dave, is asking for a better pandemic with a lover other than your mother. Like Joan, no one was thinking about the event, who grew up in what house with what drawing on the wall, and if it was leaking or not. No one is asking your origin story or do you feel safe there? Do you feel this way in the doorway on your way out of the house, not the other way around? I am sick of repeating myself. I am safe. If you listened, I'd tell you, what kind of witness is the sounder in the classroom? I am confused when Jordana's poem details how she covers her eyes just with her right hand after washing both hands. I do not know that kind of light, reading Peter write, when I said work and meant lyric. I mean to make poems not know the factory, not need the repertoire I read about in Justin's book. This is as close as I get to naming the thing. I was already uncoupled when it is suggested realism might help. The arrangement read as significant to the passerbys. They are just here for milk for the children. The wondering, yes, them too. We all have to look each other in the eye. There is no control group. There is no wound to wonder or wander around. Robert calls his notebooks not books. I have not loved someone called Robert for some time now. Yes, the poem has its own anxiety, a season when Peter writes, passion comes from a difficult world. My dad was known to be a difficult professor, but I don't like to think of the university as the world. When we gather to listen to our elders at the podium, witness codas, what kind of witness, what kind of sounder, kind counter reader, Rima at home, traffic is temporary, but Rima's father, Amy knows the poem's structure here is absence. Here, the times are never right. Jerry says he wrote that for Diane when the world seemed about to end 20 years ago. The times were never right then. Now, his granddaughter Sadie's art helps make Jerry lay out 8 rows of circles to try to figure out if time is real. The times are never right. The times are times two, times the right to, the times are never, the times the couple at the table beside me asks each other, will we come back here in 20 years? The ghost of the beauty of the world. Is it Peter's eclogue? How many storms do we have to stock up before Rima's dad dies? Justin texts me, he quoted Peter in his lecture. I hold a window up with Peter's, there is an order to the skyline to the window. And now want to know whose pages are turning. Me passing the sentences where he says I invented them. Thank you.
Oh, Michelle, that was great. Oh, it came together. Oh, it came so together. That's wonderful. I'm going to bring everyone in here. I'm going to add some spotlights. I love the language here. Let's add some spotlights. And Anthony, the camera situation is solved. There it is. Okay, so like I said, thank you. First of all, thank you all. Thank you, Hilary. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Michelle. Those were so moving. And to end this 2023-24 Common Sense series with you three is is truly incredible, truly a blessing, really. So I know I have a few questions here, and I'm sure there's probably a few questions in the chat as well. Maybe I'll start off so people can either type them in or think about things they might want to ask you all. And so I of course, am going for, and it might be a question just for one reader or everyone. I've got one for everyone. I've got multiple questions for everyone. One of the questions that I want to start with is, what are the ways in which you write yourself into your writing? And what are the ways in which you write yourself out of your writing whenever you feel like either is called for, or maybe you don't even do it consciously, but how do you allow yourselves in, and how do you sometimes allow yourselves to quiet down a little bit so other people or other sides of even yourself that you didn't know existed come in? And I think you all have permissions to unmute, so feel free to jump in. I'm going to mute myself.
I was seeing if anyone wanted to jump in. I'm curious to hear from everyone. Michelle, Nancy, it's so nice to read with you. I guess what I was thinking, Jordan, I love your questions always, but then they required real thought. And when you were asking it, I thought, I think in the writing, you can occupy a kind of like tone you couldn't sustain or achieve in your everyday life. But that might feel like an important ethos. I can't stop using the word important. I'm sorry, I like overdid it. That's an ethos or a response. And I think that that's both writing yourself in and writing yourself out, because it's like a tone that's very intense and personal to you, but it's also because it's one you can't inhabit and be like a person all the time. Then it maybe serves both purposes.
I think a lot about identity and sort of like expression and voice in my work when I teach students, because a lot of students come to university wanting to find a voice or express a voice. And most of my poetry work has been, I think, not very identity based or not like about myself. This is the first project where I've given myself permission, and I think it's just because I'm old. Like literally, I'm 40. That's like how old my dad was when his work sort of changed. My dad's a visual artist, and sort of like watching people go through their life of work, or even thinking about, Peter Gizzy's work, or Dara Wire, who now publishes as Boa Dixon, like we can change. And I think you can sort of write yourself in and out and still be that same poet, which is something as a younger poet, I thought if I put myself in, that was like just like not okay aesthetically and politically for the kind of work I was doing. And I think there's a lot of things I didn't capture from my 20s and 30s because of that, for better or for worse. Yeah, Anthony, I'm interested in what you have to say about this.
Oh, you're muted right now, Anthony. You're muted. I think I asked you to unmute. You should come. Let's see.
Is that better?
I can hear you now. Yeah,
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Michelle, first of all, I love your poem. But what you were just talking about, I feel similarly as far as my progression. When I first started writing in the late 90s, one of my main projects was to avoid the ego, to avoid the self. I was interested in, art, and like, so I wasn't there, even if I had, speakers who were human people, which most of the time I did. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about me. And as I've gotten older, I'm 51 now. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, how does that happen? Now I find like little bits of autobiography creeping in, although they're never like, I'm never telling straight stories. I mean, even when they sound like it, it's just, but yeah, this is stuff that happened, or stuff I'm thinking about, or stuff that's about me, and it still makes me feel kind of like an asshole, because why am I writing about my stuff? But it happens, and maybe this is what happens when you get old. I don't know. I don't think about it that much anymore. I'm just like, all right, well, this is what I'm writing today. You know?
yeah, I love that distinction. And not then making that distinction as well, you know? I think there is the pressure with a lot of young writers to say, I'm either in one mode or another, or to exclude a mode, and how I think this is what you're speaking to as well, Hilary, how it just becomes like an ethos of allowing it all in to some degree, or allowing the opportunity for it all to come in to some degree. I've got another question. I don't see anything in the chat. I've got another question. How does your drafting process differ from your editing process for each of you? Is there something that you return to? Do you have a way you trick yourself, maybe? I know I tend to trick myself in a drafting process. I have to kind of trick myself and to do it in a way that isn't rigid or self-conscious. And then my editing process, I have a little bit of that still in there, but it's a different thing. So I'm just wondering how your editing and your drafting processes differ, or maybe they don't. Maybe it all kind of feels again like one thing.
I guess I think that there's like an intensity to the drafting process, but also like weirdly more of a sense of collaboration. I mean, well, there's collaboration in both of them, although sometimes in editing, I feel like I'm really relying on myself in a skilled way or something, like my technical abilities. So I was just thinking that some of the lines in the poem I read were like, I think some people on this call wrote them in the kitchen. I think drafting in part is about a sort of capturing of energy, and then maybe like needing, Michelle, you were mentioning like sending something to Jordan and having him say like, you should write this. And I think that that's a big part of it. So like, I don't know if anyone else uses this Dennis Johnson system with, like, maybe it's apocryphal, but that supposedly he would share work with his wife, who sounds great. And she would only get to reply Shakespeare, Elvis, or genius. Like those are the three categories. So it had to be one of the three. And I think things like that are like a way that people can steer you or help you find the thing, but also they're like nourishing it or playing along and helping you play a little further and figure out a little more and take it far. Like, I mean, I feel like the main thing always is to take it farther. So, and then editing later, I feel like there's always a few, not exactly problems to solve, but things you couldn't quite have captured in the big rush and the big intensity. So you need to figure out how to build them in and how to build those spaces, and maybe how to like include a few more thoughts. So I guess that's my answer.
No, that's great. I love that, take it further and the big rush. I like that feeling. Even if the draft takes weeks of drafting a poem that's, a sonnet of 14 lines, it still to me always feels like a big rush that I'm just, diving into or something. Anthony, Michelle, any way to
Yeah,
describe?
I could speak to that
Yeah.
now. Yeah, I don't, well, 95% of the time, I don't go into writing anything with any type of meaningful intent. For me, it's all language. It starts because I hear something in my head or I like some words, and I draft quickly, very quickly. I write poems in 10 to 20 minutes, and then I put them in a drawer. I mean, a metaphorical drawer now because I do everything on my phone pretty much these days. Even though I have a laptop, I still write everything on the phone, and then they stay there for months or years. So the revision comes when I find something I don't remember that I wrote 3 years ago, and then I go in and I'm able to see with clearer eyes what I think I was trying to do, because often I don't remember writing it, and then I can shape it into something. You know, when I was younger, I tried to like publish things that I wrote yesterday, and I did a bunch of that, and that was fine. But I can't do that anymore. I remember reading interviews with one of my favorite poets, A.R. Ammons, who did the same thing. He would sit at his typewriter at the same desk, looking out the window, and he'd write this poem in one draft and put it in his drawer. And then once he had piled up like stacks over a couple of years, then he'd pull them out and say, "Huh, is this anything?" and that's kind of how I think I work most of the time nowadays. Except when I'm doing like, writing a sonnet every day, like the one I read, then that's fast. But otherwise, I just let it marinate. I'm old enough to where I don't care whether I publish this thing now or 10 years from now.
I'll just quickly sort of echo what both Hilary and Tony have said. I though in the 10 years since I've published a collection, like I think of myself as like a project poet, like, like I'm a poet who works on projects. They're like book projects, the poems are related. And so for me, there is the writing of a poem, but then the poems sort of edit each other as a kind of conversation. Or like this happened in editing my first two books with Rusty Morrison. Like there was too many birds and boats, and it's like you can't really have both. This is just, I mean, maybe some presses like allow that, but this was really interesting. Like I didn't realize, the collection of both of those. And something similar has happened in this manuscript, and like the editing didn't happen until they were compiled, and so I'm not good at like the New Yorker poem or the single poem or like the poem for a thing, because I really struggle. And one of the reasons the long poem has been so great is because it almost feels like there's a million beginnings and endings. And so I'm not, I think of both Jordan and Hilary and Tony now as well as like, you guys write a lot and edit a lot. I'm not as productive, I don't think. And I think some of that just comes from like waiting for the project to be full enough to like, I do a lot of like concordance, like with word clouds and a lot of like AI analysis now. And that's just like, that's sort of how I edit, like when it's like sort of all together and there's like maybe like an ARM and stack, but all along I'm like writing the poems in conversation with each other.
Yeah, this is perfect to hinge off that because of the question in the chat from Rachel, asking y'all, I'm interested in the composition of these long poems. Michelle and Hilary, did you have the sense that you were working on a long poem at the start of writing these, or did it come about organically as you sat down to write? And maybe if there's anything else you want to say, Michelle, to start this, and then Hilary, you can jump into that as well. And then Anthony, I know we're not a long poem. We're publishing, in Sprung Formal, kind of a longish poem that you wrote, but your experience with longer works as well. I'd love to hear from all three of you if it's relevant. So, Michelle.
I mean, I guess for me, and sort of the answer to this question ties into all of the questions, but in sort of confronting, I wanted to write about this deeply personal thing, which many of us have experienced, which is like the MFA workshop where everything is like so intense and like that workshop table. And I wanted to write, I long wanted to write about my divorce and my separation and my difficult marriage. And every time I tried to write about it, I just started writing about like difficult teachers I'd had, like Mark Levine. And Dean Young wasn't my teacher, but I found him rather like a difficult person. My dad was like sort of like a difficult man, a great artist to deal with. And so my ex-husband's not an artist or anything, but I think sort of like landing on the permission to sort of, and I knew it had to be a long poem because I'd never written one. And I knew I couldn't just write a poem about it. Like it had to be a long poem that was almost, I was like, I'm just gonna write it. And it almost felt like what I know writers do, which is like, you got to get it out. I had never felt that way because I don't think I'd ever wanted to write anything confessional, but something about Dean Young dying, like, I don't know why that made me feel like I needed to write about my divorce. And so, the poem just like never ended. And I kept sending Jordan parts, and Emily Pettit, our friend as well. And they were like, it's good, keep going. And that's honestly what I needed. Someone saying like, this is interesting. And they both were saying it's different than your other poems. And I think that in the form I had found something. I mean, we all have taken many long poem classes. I think, Jordan, we were in one with Robert Haas at Iowa. Like the long poem is this thing. And I don't think of myself as someone that can sort of like sustain a long poem, but then over like a long time, I guess I was able to, but definitely for me, having friends willing to read little parts and even the many parts and just say yes, like having an audience beside the self was really important. And I think hearing that other people were writing long poems, like I think I went to a reading and heard Bianca Stone read something a bit longer than normal, and you know, and maybe it is aging, just being like Anthony said, like, I'm just going to say the stuff. I'm not going to edit myself. I don't know, as I get older, maybe I'll get even more risky. Thanks for the question.
Hilary.
I just wrote that poem. Like I just started it this week and wrote it for this reading. So I maybe don't have a lot of insight, but I was for a long time. And I also owe a lot of thanks to Carolyn, Zach, and Alyssa and Justin, who are here. um, uh, I really was just like, had that syntax stuck in my head. I've seen so much Law and Order in my life, and that should be worth something. Like, and I find it so like soothing and also troubling, you know, like, so there was something about the specific syntax, and then I got very hung up on the word groups, because you're like, why did they go with the word groups? Like the police aren't a group, district attorneys aren't a group. Like you could have said forces, and that would have been much better. Like you could have said a lot of other words, but then when they did it, they had to stick with it for 20 years. Anyway, so that's what I was focused on. But I think like that question, I'm more of a prose writer. I write more books of prose. And so I find like, I feel very envious of all of you poets, but I also find it very like crazy making. Like when something gets stuck like that, you have to, like, you gotta go do it. And that feels, I think when I like writing a novel, it's like, it feels methodical, but you know it's stupid. You know, like you're gonna write it for 5 years and then you might just throw it out. But there's something like you're doing such a good job being methodical about it, that's sort of like reassuring and smart. And you're like, what a good job I'm doing writing this novel. Eventually I might just throw it out. But writing a poem to me feels like more like a drug or something, where you're like, I just have to go do that. And so it feels very smart. And only later I'm like, what was I doing? Why did I go do that? Anyway, so there's like a different kind of feeling to it. And I think the long poem maybe gets to combine those things a little, where you're in an essayistic mode and can keep attaching thoughts to other thoughts, or saying like this thought can talk to this thought if it wants. So that's nice. And it means you don't have to come down for a while.
Anthony, any thoughts about the going into a longer form?
Yeah, just a few. I don't really write what's traditionally called a long poem, but I'm of the school of thought that everything that you do is connected, or at least everything I do is connected. And I'm arrogant enough to think that it's in um, correspondence with everything else. Yeah. I'm in the same room with Shakespeare and with Bukowski, and with Virginia Woolf. I mean, all literature speaks to one another or thing. And so to micro that, everything that I write is all part of the same big thing. And at 50 years old, I had my first book come out after writing for 25. So that's weird to some people. I mean, I know people who got their first book deals and when they were at MFA, right? I got kicked out of my MFA, so I didn't get to do that. But up until before this book, I had five different manuscripts, and pretty much four of them were projects. There were individual poems, but they were all projects. So I get that, and so I feel like each one of those books is kind of a long poem in that. So yeah, so I mean, I get it. I just don't. I can't sit down and extend like one big piece for a long time. I've got this very short attention span. So if I can't draft something in under an hour, then it becomes its own thing and I go on and do something else. But then they all connect at some point, even if it takes 20 years. So, but I admire folks who can do that. This is why I can't write a novel, because I can't sustain it. I've got a few years, so maybe I'll move on. I don't know. Right?
You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
I mean, I never thought I was going to be a poet. I'll tell you that. And then look what happened.
Oh, neither did I. Are you
Oops,
kidding?
oops. Um, okay, I've got a question from, I think Marley directed messaged me. I don't think it was intentional, but I've got one from Marley. It probably didn't show up in the chat for you all. This is for you all. What role do you view poetry playing in the idea of perhaps removing the silence of voices, specifically voices that might be historically overlooked, marginalized, anything like that. What role do you see yourselves, and I know there was a lot of poems today with that, the idea of people at the margins, or there was, material about Jewishness, there's material about what's going on right now in the Middle East. There's, I know Hilary, you write extensively about this. So, I guess your role in all of that, how do you view your role in all of that?
I'll be quick. This might seem irresponsible, but I don't think I speak for anybody. I speak about things I see and I feel and all that shit, right? And but yeah, I'm not a politician. I'm not an activist. I'm not a voice for anybody. If you see me talking in my poems sometimes about uh, being a brown person or being Mexican or being Jewish and having, all those things are there because they're part of my life. But I can't say do this, do that. So yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of people think that's maybe a cowardly stance. I don't. I'm just doing what I can do. So that's it.
Thank you, Anthony. Michelle, Hilary?
Yeah, I mean, right now at a lot of our universities, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I don't know what my role is in the world, but I do know that one thing I can do every week is gather 16 students with different economic preparations, different scholastic, different religions, different views about Israel-Palestine around the table, and we can have a classroom where we respect each other, look each other in the eye. I don't know that I could do that like with all of the hundreds of students that, like I don't know if I could do it on a big scale. That's why I'm not a dean or a provost or and I'm not saying I'm doing it well. It feels like the thing I maybe can do, and that's what I try to do. And students beautifully criticize that kind of optimism all the time. And I remind them that I'm not a peer with them, and it might be easier for me to animate this. And I'm not saying I'm doing it well, but it's like when I wake up on Tuesday and Thursday, I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. We're going to sit around the table and look at each other and respect each other through everything, through COVID, through people masking and not masking. There's always like a lot of stuff going on at colleges with different kinds of students. Yeah, and I teach courses about activist poetry. I teach Mark Nowak's social poetics, but I am no Mark Nowak, and I am not capable of the kind of activism and real, his Instagram persona is impressive. I don't really have one besides posting my children, which is a cop-out in many ways, because of the fears of university, how they treat us, what we're allowed to say, doxing, certain things like that. So maybe that's why I'm a kind of quiet. I don't know, but I do know that the classroom is the place where and with those 16, that's sort of where I feel like it can maybe happen.
Yeah. Michelle, I just wrote down that sentence, beautifully criticized that optimism. Anyway, I think that classroom is key to it, and this has like another layer, Michelle, because your poem was about to like the difficulties too in the classroom, and like that it's still there, like it's still revealing itself to you like years and years later. But I think like that model in which people are gathered and are vulnerable and mutual and are both private and public, like that is connected to like the work of poetry or literature, like the ability to have a classroom or a space or any kind of space like that it's connected to that work, I think, like from the text and the practice of writing. So I think like, poetry is more and more in itself like marginalized as a form, right? It's kind of been shoved out of most of big publishing. There isn't an idea of it as this powerful social force, particularly at the moment. you know, like it can't be adapted for TV and all that, you know, like, but I think that that really reinforces what about it is so precious and valuable to people, and why people keep returning to it, is that it's not, you know, not a product. It is so, it can be so private, and yet it's meant to be shared. It's a place where people can make language their own with someone else, with other people. I don't know, like there's just something about the space and the work of it and the way that it's a gathering place that is really invaluable. And I think that the more people try to pretend it's not that important, the more you're like, it must be really important. You guys wouldn't be trying to shove it to the side or quiet it down or replace it with whatever kinds of chatbot run classes we're gonna have to fight off. Anyway, yeah, Michelle, I'm just sort of vaguely echoing what you said, but I think that it's both like a really special place for people to realize the particularities of their vision and say and refuse to say things, and also it's a place where people meet. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was listening to something recently, and an author said the biggest mistake is when people called Twitter a town square. And they're like, it's not a town square because you're not interacting with the person who baked your bread. You're not interacting with the person who teaches your child at school. You're not and so I think we've vastly lost our connection to what a polis means in this digital world. And being in the classroom, like what you all said, or just being with myself and saying, this is what I see, Anthony. This is what's in front of me. This is what's around me. I need to shrink a lot to kind of see what I really mean to say and how I say it and who I'm saying it to. So I really appreciate your answers because yeah, it's it's a landscape for sure. It's all a very intense landscape for sure. Um, these are great questions and great answers from you all. I just want to appreciate I want to echo my appreciation to you all for your reading, for your time, for the things that you write. I respect you all so much. And do know that, you know, it's recorded. I'll get it up to YouTube. So anyone who didn't show up for this, please recommend that they check it out, because I think this was such a dynamic reading, and like I'm seeing in the chat right now, a really thoughtful and articulate Q&A. So thank you all. Thanks to Hilary and Anthony and Michelle for being here. The dogs that are now saying it's my turn, I get. And y'all have a great rest of your day. I always say I love having these readings so early, at least 3 o'clock my time, because I can go back out into the world, you know, feeling the charge of it instead of going to bed, which I go to bed at like 9. So thank you all for coming. And I hope to see you, those of you in Kansas City, here in town in a few months, and those online a few months after that. Okay. Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you.